One thing that I've heard doctors tell me over and over again is that medical conditions aside, that I should treat my child with differences like I would my average child, that he is no different and that I should carry on as I normally would. In some ways I agree, but I also think that there are certain emotional and psychological considerations that go along with having a child with differences. This is not a conversation that any doctors have provided guidance on, but I think it's really important to have these conversations, and I plan to have these conversations with my child at some point. Hi there, my name is Cynthia Veronica, and I have a 4-year-old son with achondroplasia. Achondroplasia is the most common form of dwarfism. My son actually understands a lot, and sometimes I realize that he understands a lot more than what I actually give him credit for. One thing that has been really tricky for me is navigating between ensuring that my son feels a sense of normalcy at home, at school, in virtually any environment, but at the same time, having him understand that he does have a condition that makes him very unique. The reason I think it's important to have this conversation with him is because I want him to understand why he may look a little different from his peers. Another reason is because his peers may actually approach him and ask him questions as to why he looks a little bit different, and this has happened. And if it happens when I'm not around, I want to ensure that he has an age-appropriate response and that he's comfortable with that response. And also understanding that it's not necessarily other kids being malicious, it's just that kids are curious by nature and they're going to ask these questions. I think Sebastian knows that he is little. He may not necessarily understand why, but I do think that there is an awareness when it comes to his size compared to his peers or his sister or cousins. It's not a direct conversation that I've had with him. So here are 5 things that I've done so far to ease into the conversation with my son. The first thing I've done is I've exposed him to other people that are little. We have gone to a lot of local LPA chapter events and also national events, and we've actually brought him with us to try to expose him to as many little people as possible. The very first conference that we went to was in Boston when he was just 9 months old. We've also gone to Christmas parties, we've gone to Easter parties, we've done a lot of events. I wish there were a lot more in our area, but we go to as many as we can. I think that this is just really great exposure for him, and as he gets older, I want him to be more and more a part of the community. The second thing I've done is we've read a lot of books about little people. There's one book in particular, it's called Thinking Big, and it basically describes the life of an 8-year-old girl named Jamie who has achondroplasia. It's actually a really old book. I think it was published in the 1980s, and it actually was gifted to me by another parent of a little person. So Sebastian and I read this book together, and I actually really like it because it actually has photographs of a child with achondroplasia as opposed to drawings. So this book actually has a lot of photographs of Jamie, and I noticed that Sebastian looks at the photos very curiously, and he does ask me a lot of questions about her. And it shows Jamie doing a lot of different things. It shows her climbing into the fridge to get food. It shows her going up and down the stairs in her own unique, unusual way. So it's something that he can really relate to. It also features Jamie's 5-year-old brother, who is 3 years younger than her, but is also very sweet and very loving. At one point in the book, they go out and sell Girl Scout cookies, and her brother goes along and he actually helps her ring the doorbell for each of the houses because she's not able to reach on her own. In the book, it also shows Jamie tripping and falling as she was running, which is something that's very common for kids with achondroplasia. And her friends actually run back to help her. They help her up, and it's very sweet and endearing. They're actually holding hands with her as they, continue on their way. And they walk with her just to make sure that she doesn't fall again. So as we were reading the book, I asked Sebastian certain questions about what he thinks about Jamie. I point out things like, oh, these are Jamie's classmates, and look, they're a lot taller than her. Oh, look, there's her brother, and he's a lot taller than her, even though he's 3 years younger. And I also point out how everybody loves her. Her brother looks up to her. He can't read, and so he relies on her to read him stories, and he seems to really enjoy it. And her classmates really like helping her. They seem to really enjoy each other's company. The third thing I do is I point out that being taller doesn't necessarily equate with being older. So I basically have said to my son, just because someone's taller doesn't mean they're older, and vice versa. Just because someone is shorter doesn't mean that they're younger. I've pointed this out with certain people in our lives, but I've also pointed it out in books. There's a book called Not Too Big, Not Too Small, Just Right for Me. And I think most parents of little people probably have this book. There's a perfect picture in this book of a boy who is tall and his grandfather who is short. I turn to this page and I point out to Sebastian, the boy, and his grandfather. Then I ask him, who is taller? Okay, now who do you think is older? And then I say, oh, I see. So just because someone is taller doesn't mean they're older. And just because someone is shorter doesn't mean that they're younger. I think that kids get this concept more with adults. For some reason, with other kids, they just seem to think that height and age have a direct correlation. And I think that this is probably also why kids in his school have probably referred to him as a baby. They see that he is shorter and they just don't realize that height and age are incongruous. So the fourth thing that I do is I promote emotional intelligence. I want my son to be able to talk to me about his feelings and to also process his emotions in a positive way. Right now he's 4 years old, so he does have occasional tantrums. When he does this, I tell him, listen, when you don't get what you want, rather than kicking and screaming, you can say, Mommy, I'm mad. And that's something we can talk about and we can work through it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. When it does work, he says to me, Mommy, I'm mad. And it's great because then we can talk about it and figure out where to go from there. Also, when he's calm, what I've done is I show him feeling cards. When I show him the cards, I basically try to go through the whole array of feelings. I'll pick up the card that says sad and I'll say, oh, look, there's a little boy that's crying. Why do you think he's crying? Do you think maybe he fell down and hurt his knee? I let him describe the various emotions to me and let him try to figure out why that emotion arises. And it's important to make space for these conversations and to set aside time to talk about emotions. Because once they're older, if those conversations didn't happen earlier on, it's very unlikely that they're going to open up. They may not approach you with their emotions. Depression shows up so much more differently in boys than it does in girls. And opening up and talking about emotions is something that doesn't come as easily for boys than it does for girls. And so whether your child has differences or not, it's just very important for them to have that safe person that they can go to talk about their emotions and be able to open up about it. When Sebastian starts to see more and more as he gets older that he is different from his peers, I want him to be able to come to me and talk to me about those emotions that he's feeling. And I realize that I may not be able to solve every single problem that he comes to me with, but I can be there to listen to him and to support him in any way that I can. So the fifth thing is educate other children about dwarfism. I have gone to my son's school in October for Dwarfism Awareness Month, and I've spoken to the other kids about dwarfism, about being unique in general, and really just celebrating dwarfism. I let them know that dwarfism is rare, but even so, there's hundreds of different types of dwarfism all over the world. I've brought in a book called Strong and Mighty Max have read it to the kids, and I emphasize similarities. Basically, you know, even though someone may be different from you, they may have a lot of similarities. And you know, you never know. Someone may like ice cream just like you. Someone may like going to the park or riding their bike. The reason I do this is because I'm not going to be around Sebastian every single day while he's at school. And it's important for me for my son's peers to be accepting, understanding, tolerant, embracing of differences. So if I can go in there on my own and explain to them what dwarfism is, then I can help my son in navigating his own sense of uniqueness, and I can help with his peers understanding him a little bit more. If Sebastian's peers are able to understand a little bit more about dwarfism and why he's different, then they're probably more likely able to see past it and realize that there's more than just the physical. There's so much more to a person than just what they look like on the outside. So this is what I've basically done so far to sort of ease into that conversation with Sebastian about him being little. It's been so exciting to see Sebastian developing so beautifully. I'm so incredibly proud of him. And I'm excited to continue on with this journey with both of my kids. So let me know in the comments section if you have any other tips to share. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.